I actually thought it would be 2 weeks, but the president wants to achieve more, it seems, and not want to have to do this again a year from now because so many targets were left untouched.
Today is Tuesday, March 17th. This is Boundless Insights, and I'm Aviva Klompas. The war with Iran has now entered its third week, and attention is turning to the larger questions about where this conflict is heading and what it can achieve. In the United States, the debate has focused on the scope of American involvement. Will we, for example, see American boots on the ground? And how does a sustained military campaign fit with President Trump's long-standing America First doctrine? There are also strategic questions about what success looks like. What outcomes are realistically achievable for the United States and Israel? Is the goal to degrade Iran's military capabilities, force political change in Tehran, or reshape the balance of power in the region? And stepping back even further is the global dimension. How is this conflict being interpreted by other major powers, particularly China and Russia? And does it ultimately strengthen or weaken American deterrence around the world? To help us think through these questions, I'm joined today by Elliott Abrams, a senior fellow for Middle Eastern Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Elliott has held senior national security roles in multiple administrations, including serving as Deputy National Security Advisor under President George W. Bush and as Special Representative for Iran in the first Trump administration. Let's get into it. Elliott Abrams, welcome to Boundless Insights.
Glad to be here with you.
It's a real honor to have you on. We are 3 weeks into the operation against Iran, and I'd actually be curious to know if you describe it as a conflict or a war. But more importantly, from your vantage point, how do you assess the trajectory of how it's going so far?
Well, I generally use the word conflict, but I don't shy away from the use of the term war either. How is it going? I think that the United States and Israel are, in fact, destroying the targets we have wanted to destroy, which is the targets that allow Iran to make war. To that, you could add, Israel in particular is trying to hit at targets that allow the Iranian regime to repress the people of Iran. That's a lot harder. But I think we are considerably advanced in destroying the Iranian military machine. The disappointment, I guess, 2 weeks in, is that they still have a substantial number of missiles, missile launchers, and drones, which to me shows that the decision to attack Iran was the right decision, because with every passing year, they would have increased the number of missiles and drones, and of course gotten closer to a nuclear weapon.
I'm sure you're seeing the same polls as me that show that the American public is largely not supportive of the campaign, and their chief issue appears to be that they feel the president hasn't made the case to the country about why this war was necessary and why it's necessary now. Do you want to take a stab at it?
Well, first, let me say I agree with the criticism that neither the president or anybody else, Secretary of State, for example, has made the case. I think the president should have given a formal speech to the nation one evening early on explaining what he was doing. That said, the polls seem to suggest that we're in a very partisan moment. Basically, Democrats oppose whatever the president does, including this. Republicans support whatever he does, including this. There has been a line out there that the president's base, Trump voters, MAGA voters, don't like this war and aren't supporting it. Polls do not show that. Polls show a very, very high level of support among Trump voters, most of whom are Republican, but not all, of course, and even higher levels of support among people who describe themselves as MAGA. So I think the support levels are pretty predictable. And there's been a lot of campaigning against the war. I mean, if you read the New York Times every day,
I try not to.
You would have a very different, if that were your sole source of information, because you're not just seeing, I would call it biased reporting. I think in the case of the New York Times, it's a campaign against the war because it's a campaign against the president.
When I look at those polling numbers on how Americans supposedly feel about a war in Iran, I actually think they're just a referendum on how they feel about the president or they feel about Israel, and a little bit less to do with Iran. But I actually would love it if you would try to make the case that the American public needs to hear.
I think the American public should have been reminded, or should be. The Islamic Republic of Iran decided in 1979, when it was created, that the United States is the enemy. There's only one country in the world that has decade after decade been saying death to America and death to Israel. So this is a country that defined itself as an enemy and has for decades been killing Americans. And I would have the president go through the list: the Marine barracks in Beirut, Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia, the hundreds they killed and thousands they injured and maimed during the Iraq War. More recently, there is a huge buildup of ballistic missiles and drones and a nuclear weapons program. The proof that this is a nuclear weapons program meant to create bombs is overwhelming. So here is this country, the greatest state sponsor of terrorism, Hamas, Hezbollah, murders and attempted terrorist murders in Europe, murders of hundreds and hundreds of Americans, now trying to build up a massive military force, now trying to surround Israel through its proxies, and most dangerous of all, clearly trying to create a nuclear weapon. It is not in the interest of the United States to allow that to happen. It's not just to protect our friends, partners, allies in the region, it's to protect ourselves. Because if that country had nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles, we become the target. And when they say death to America, they may mean it.
One of the most damning things that I read about was Steve Witkoff saying that in the course of negotiations, America actually offered Iran uranium for civil purposes, that they would give it to them. So there wouldn't be a need for Iran to produce it on their own. And they were going to give it to them for free. And Iran said no.
Yeah, it's true. Look, there have been countries that have moved away from trying to get a nuclear weapon. Brazil, Argentina, Ukraine, South Africa, Libya. We know what it looks like. They cooperate with us. They cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency. They don't do anything in secret. Iran was the exact opposite. Everything was done secretly. They lied and lied about it. Much of what we know about it was obtained when Israel stole their nuclear records in a sort of fantastic intelligence achievement. All you need to do, if you don't even need to believe the United States, just believe what the International Atomic Energy Agency is saying about the Iranian nuclear program, about the questions that Iran will not answer, about the locations Iran will not permit IAEA inspectors to go to. This is a nuclear weapons program.
Let me ask you something. Given all of that, when we think about this war and what its goals are, how would you describe them? Is this about degrading Iran's military capabilities? Is it about trying to force regime change? Is it about trying to rebalance what the Middle East looks like altogether?
I think it is about destroying Iran's military, including its nuclear capability. There are other things that might come of it if it is a successful war, including the fall of the regime. And by the way, when I say that, I don't mean the fall of the regime tomorrow morning. If, for example, the regime were to fall 2 years from today, I think we would all say, well, it wouldn't have happened like that if it weren't for the war in March 2026. But those are byproducts that we hope to have. The main effort here is to destroy Iran's ability to promote terrorism, to threaten its neighbors, to threaten us, and to build a nuclear weapon.
Do you think we're going to see American boots on the ground?
When you look at the dispatch of the several thousand Marines, what do Marines do? I mean, we've all seen World War II movies, amphibious assaults, and that leads me to think the president is very much contemplating storming, taking Karg Island, which is, as more and more Americans are learning, the place from which 90% of Iran's oil exports come. Now, there is one other possibility, and that's trying to get at some of the,
Is that to nab the uranium?
yeah, that's very hard. It's a great thing to do if it's doable. That's the kind of boots on the ground engagement that the president has not wanted. If you look at first at his rhetoric, criticisms of the Bush and Biden administrations, but then secondly, what has he done? Soleimani in his first term.
Just for people who might not know, Soleimani was an Iranian general that Trump had assassinated.
Right. He was the head of the Quds Force, which was their overseas terrorism force. And he was assassinated in the first term. Midnight Hammer, of course, was last June, was the attack on some Iranian deeply dug nuclear sites. Venezuela in January.
This, by the way, is all your portfolio in the first Trump administration. He just, I think, took your wish list, actually, and decided to take care of them now.
I wish he had taken care of them in the first term, but I'll take this. Each of these things took from the time it started, time it was over a day, half a day. When the president announced them, they're over. This is obviously different. This is now going to the third week. I actually thought it would be 2 weeks, but the president wants to achieve more, it seems, and not want to have to do this again a year from now because so many targets were left untouched. None of this, including the possibility of an amphibious assault that captures Kharg Island, which is about 15 miles off the coast of Iran, none of this is anything like what we would need to do on land in Iran to get at those nuclear sites, because you'd have to build a significant perimeter. You'd have to put thousands of people on the ground, I think. And that's the kind of thing that the president has not wanted to do. And of course, there's a real chance of very significant casualties. So I'm still doubtful that he'll do that.
What about with the Straits of Hormuz? As everybody's becoming an expert now on Iran, as you've pointed out, we've all learned that it's 20% of the global oil supply is supposed to go through the Straits. It's causing economic scares across the world. Tell us about that.
Well, it's a very striking thing. This is not the first time the Strait has been closed. It's probably not the last time either. So why don't people build pipelines that go around it? Well, the Saudis have. And what that 20 million barrels a day is now not completely off the market because about 5 million is going through a Saudi pipeline that goes to the Red Sea. If you sort of think of the map, that goes southwest all across Saudi Arabia, about 700 miles to the Red Sea. The Emirates, the United Arab Emirates, built an internal pipeline because they're on the Strait of Hormuz. So they can get east of it, but their port east of it is very close to Iran and is being attacked by Iran. It's in an emirate called Fujairah. So you're left with the Strait of Hormuz and the need probably to continue bombing Iran's capabilities, that is, naval ships, fast boats, coastal artillery, everything that could be used, drone sites. You need then to have naval ships that convoy tankers through. And the president is now asking for other countries to help do that. And it's a very reasonable thing to ask because we don't actually need that oil. We're pretty self-sufficient in oil and natural gas. The Chinese need it, the Indians need it, the Japanese need it, the Europeans need some of it. So it is reasonable to say, where are your Navy ships? Now, some of them don't have any, but others do, and they have relevant kinds of ships. So he's right to ask that, and I'm hopeful that they will respond. After this is over, whether it's in a day or a week or 2 weeks.
I like that you put the limit at 2 weeks. I think people are anticipating a bit longer.
Well, we've got, 2 weeks more in March, basically, and I have a hard time seeing it go beyond March. So when it does end, I think we've got to look at that pipeline question. As I said, the Saudis have a pipeline, so why not build another right next to it? And this one can, in an emergency, do 7 million barrels a day. And it's an old pipeline. So do a pipeline that can do 10 million barrels a day. And then you've got most of what's going through the Strait of Hormuz. By the way, It is worth mentioning. There used to be another pipeline. Under the British Palestine Mandate, there was a Kirkuk, Iraq to Haifa
Oh,
pipeline
that's
that
interesting.
took oil right to the Mediterranean. And obviously that'd be even better. I think we're some years away from that, but someday maybe.
Abraham Accords 2.0.
Yeah, maybe 3.0.
Maybe 3.0. Well, I like your point, though, that once this is over, the international community needs to mitigate so that Iran can't hold the entire world hostage anymore. A lot of Americans believe that President Trump's foreign policy was pretty simple. It was America first, avoid endless wars, and keep American troops out of prolonged conflict. But as you've described, the rules seem to be evolving. Can you explain what changed?
I think the answer is that there were a lot of people who were attracted to the president, who supported him, who were ideologues, and he's not an ideologue. And so he would have rules, but his rules are made to be broken. So when he sees this situation regarding Iran, he says, well, no, we can't permit that. We're going to have to act. Whereas some of his supporters say, no, 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 you can't act. We don't do that. And in this case, I think it's a good thing that he's not an ideologue. America first to him means you do what's in the interest of the United States, whether it's in Asia or Europe or whatever. In this case, he formed a conclusion as to what was in our interest, and he saw correctly Iran as an enemy of the United States in multiple ways. And he saw that time was getting away from us. If you look at the difficulty we're having now, again, in destroying their military capabilities, where would we be in 5 years? And he wouldn't be present and able to address this. Where would we be even in 2 years? It just gets worse. So there's no point in waiting.
You mentioned enemies of the United States, and one of the things that I find frustrating in the discourse that I see play out in the mainstream media is the myopic focus of this being about Iran. And I know that your specialty is actually quite a lot larger than that and very much on point for this conversation. So I wonder if you can talk to us about the broader landscape of how China and Russia view this war and whether this war is strengthening U.S. deterrence globally.
Yeah, there is an argument, as you know, that, oh no, this is terrible for U.S. deterrence globally because we're using up too many weapons.
We see it constantly, and this war is costing us billions. We're running out of interceptors. Stockpiles are down. We've amassed all of our warships and troops in one region of the world, etc.
It's not crazy. I mean, we are using up a lot, but I think when you balance it out, it's a bad argument. First, take the point of view of China. What are the Chinese seeing? They are seeing that American arms are the best, that they work. They're seeing that we know how to use them. And what I mean by that is that his military has never done anything, actually. I mean, he may think, well, they're well trained, they're drilled. They could conquer Taiwan, maybe. And maybe in a wartime situation, they would perform badly, particularly, by the way, acknowledging that he has fired half of the high command in the Chinese military. So he sees that, and he sees something else, which is willpower. That is, if he's bargaining that Donald Trump, as we were saying a minute ago on the America First line, oh, he'll never do anything that takes more than a day. Wrong. So I think this is a deterrent to the Chinese in those ways, and one more. China was getting a lot of oil from Iran. 90% of Iran's oil was going to China, and getting a lot of oil from Venezuela. Now, if we take Kharg Island, then the president who is going to meet Xi Jinping, well, it was supposed to be March 31, could be delayed because of the war, but he'll be going into that meeting with an extraordinary asset in his pocket. If we can control both Iranian and already Venezuelan oil output, it is a reminder to Xi Jinping, you need to import millions and millions of barrels of oil a day, and I can stop it. So I don't think the Chinese come out of this. I've seen the arguments, but I think they do not come out of this stronger. Russia's a different story because they're not an oil importer, they're an oil exporter. So if they're exporting not at $70 a barrel, but $100 a barrel,
Because they've lifted some of the sanctions now to allow Russia to export, right?
we have, yes. Or I'd say to allow countries who are going to be short because of the Strait of Hormuz to buy it. So the Russians are going to have more money. There's no question about that. But again, I'd say, they've seen the American military at work. They saw this amazing demonstration in Caracas, Venezuela. They saw Midnight Hammer in Iran. They're seeing this now. And of course, it's all the will of the American president. So I think it is a deterrent. If you are Putin and you're thinking, maybe I should do a little venture in Estonia, which is a NATO member, or Finland, I think you are much less likely to do that now than you were.
Elliott, we ran out of time, but I could talk to you for a very long, long time. So I do hope that you'll come back.
I will. It's been fun.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Boundless Insights. Whether you've been with us from the start or are just discovering our show, we're so glad you're here. If today's conversation sparked a question, challenged your thinking, or made you shake your head, I want to hear from you. Email me at podcast@boundlessisrael.org. Your feedback gives us ideas for new topics and new guests. And if you believe these conversations matter, there are 3 ways to support the show. First, hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. Second, help us spread the word. Share an episode with friends and family, post about it, or mention it in a group chat. It really does make a difference. And third, consider supporting our work. Boundless is a nonprofit, and we rely on donors to keep the show going. You can make a gift at boundlessisrael.org/donate. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep the conversation going.